Hello, everyone. This is Andreas Lübbering from PatentSite. We're about to start this webinar. The 100 participant just joined, so I think that's a good point to start. Yep, a warm welcome to another LexisNexis PatentSite webinar. This time in cooperation or association with Econsite and CESTEC. Together. Today we will address the question, where is the automotive industry headed, / heading electric, hybrid or hyper efficient ICEs. Before we start, some organizational points. As always, this webinar will be recorded, and you'll get a link as a follow-up to the recording of the webinar. And also, we have a handout already available in the GoToWebinar application. But we will share that with you later on as well. In addition, in this GoToWebinar application, we have a section for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we try our best to answer them during the session or later on. What's a little bit different this time is we'll have a really short service at the end of the webinar, and it would be great if you take a few minutes to fill this survey out. Okay, yeah, next slides, please, to introduce the presenters. Yep, no worries. We might look a little bit different at the moment as all the barber shops have been closed down, but I'm pretty sure you will still be able to recognize us. My name is, I'll start with myself. I know it's not the nicest way, but I start with myself to keep it in the order of the presentation. My name is Andreas Lübbering, Senior Customer Success Manager at PatentSite. I'm responsible at PatentSite to make our customers happy with the software, with our application. I work with them on a daily basis, especially with a lot of clients from the automotive industry. I do have support. We in general have support today. We have on the left here, we have Lukas Flückiger, who is CEO at CESTEC Switzerland, which is an engineering consulting company that uses numerical modeling and simulation for product development. Lucas has many years of experience as a patent expert at the Swiss Patent Office. And after leaving the Swiss Patent Office, he started the company CESTEC in Switzerland. His main focus is in the area of internal combustion engine simulation and development. So perfect for the webinar today. And in addition, he also supports customers in the area of intellectual property with patent searches and technology assessments. Presenting alongside is Jochen Spuck, a CTO at Econsite, a Swiss-based business and technology consulting company. He holds a PhD in chemistry, and after working for several years in different industry, Jochen joined the Swiss Patent Office in 2008, also where they got to know each other. Here he worked for 11 years as a patent expert, and later as a business development manager of the patent service branch of the Swiss Patent Office, which is called IP Search. In 2019, he left the office to found Econsite, and today he and Econsite offers patent analysis services to various customers from all kinds of technologies. And today it's going to be about automotive. Yes, let's go one step further. Back to the question, what the future of the mobility will look like. So to challenge carbon dioxide emission goals, all OEMs publish different strategies. So we have Toyota with their environmental challenge 2050. We have Mercedes-Benz trying for a changeover to Euro 6, and besides all these published strategies, the market hype in general revolves around electric vehicles. And what you can see is all companies, they have different strategies, and while the main hype still revolves about electric vehicles in the public opinion. OEMs, for example, still make a lot of money with SUVs. So in essence, no one can really tell what OEMs are actually targeting for. There's a lot of insecurity and uncertainty in the field, where to go and what to do. And this is where patent data comes into account, or patent analytics, because patents offer a tremendous amount of information in which directions companies are going, what they're doing, what are the R&D activities. And what you will see later on, based on patent analytics and patent information, is that this patent data suggests that there's still a lot of R&D activities in the field of hybrid and ICE propulsion, which is not that obvious from the public discussion. So patent data offers a lot of information. The problem is you face two really big challenges with patent data. The first one is the data quality is insufficient. Patent data is publicly available, but you face incomplete ownership information, you have wrong translation and misspellings, and also ambiguous legal status information. So the data quality is not sufficient the way it is to conduct analyses based on this. The other, even bigger challenge, I would say, is the sheer masses of patents flooding the market. So in 2018 alone, we saw 3.2 million patent applications, mainly driven by China, yes, but over 3 million patent applications. And if you then also take into account that 80% of all these patents have no commercial value, yeah, you see the necessity for tools to give you the chance or the possibility to identify these 20%, some studies even say less, 10%, 5% relevant patents and who owns them. So what you need is data cleaning, yeah, but also tools to identify relevant patents. And this is where PatentSight comes into account, data-driven patent valuation with PatentSight. The first two steps, they concern data cleaning. So what we do is we check the legal status of patents today. So are these active or not? Because we say, and I think we all can agree on this, only patents active today contribute to the overall strength of a patent portfolio. We do not only check the legal status of a patent today, we also track the legal status over time, which gives you the possibility to kind of travel back in time, have a look how the active portfolio of a company looked like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to have a look at trends. The other part of the data cleaning is harmonizing applicant names, checking for M&A activities, reassignments. I guess most of you have already worked a little bit with patent data. You know how painfully difficult it can be to identify the actual owner of a patent, the entity who is ultimately in control of the patent, because you have different applicant names, you have misspellings, you have wrong translations, also M&A activity, reassignments of patents. And we have a dedicated team sitting in Germany, but also internationally located, with a lot of native speakers also. And this team is not doing anything else that's then setting up these company structures to make sure that when you go to or use our solutions, you will see and search for a specific company, you can be sure that all relevant applicants and subsidiaries are covered in this, what we call an ultimate owner. So this is the part of the data cleaning. The next part is giving you a tool to identify the relevant patents. Our indicator for the quality of one patent family is the competitive impact here on the right. Competitive impact bases on two indicators which have shown high correlation in scientific literature with the actual value of a patent. I'll just quickly explain them. Technology relevance is a citation-based indicator. So what we do is we count the number of forward citations a patent receives. We also apply some corrections here, but in general, the more citations a patent receives, the more relevant it is. Works a little bit like Google PageRank. The other indicator is the market coverage. A patent is a territorial right. So when you want to protect your technology in a specific market, you have to file a patent in this country or at this authority. So also the size or the market size a patent family is protecting is decisive for the value. And as a proxy for the market size, we take the gross national income here. So it's about relevance, like an external view from examiners on a patent, and the internal view, like the view a company has on a patent family. The further I protect my patent family, or the broader I protect my family, the more valuable I think it is. Then we combine these indicators simply by multiplying them to get to the competitive impact. And now where patent side are rather in the variation of patent portfolios, not so much single patents. Jochen, if you could click one step further, this is where the patent asset index comes into account, because we at patent side, we can indicate low valuable, high valuable patent, but decision whether a patent is valuable or not is at the end at our customers. They have way more knowledge about the patent, background information, and so on. So this is where the patent asset index comes into account. It's basically the sum of all competitive impacts of those families which lie within one specific portfolio. So the patent asset index is our indicator for the total strength of a patent and or a patent portfolio, while the competitive impact is our indicator for the quality or the average quality of a portfolio. This is in a nutshell what we do at patent side, and now we want to apply this to the specific question we're asking today, what the future of mobility will look like. And with this, I will hand over to Lucas.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Lucas Flückiger speaking. So what we did in this particular situation, asking the question is regarding propulsion systems in automotive vehicles or industry. The question that came up was, is the success of certain OEMs or certain technology somehow foreseeable? Or I should say, was it foreseeable, or is it a complete surprise? For that, we are also using non-CESTEC, non-patent site data. For example, on the right here, you see a plot that is provided by PA Consulting, which shows an interesting scatter and trend with the CO2 emissions target in Europe. So that's on the right of the graph. And you see a scatter of, I would say, some of the most important OEMs and how they relate to the target that they have to comply with by 2021 and then 2025 and so forth. Of course, this is over vehicle weight, as you can see on the x-axis on the bottom. So you don't have to look on that plot for a whole long period of time, and you'll see that Toyota is very close to the target of 95 grams per kilometer, which applies to their fleet. And so we looked at the portfolio of Toyota, and in this case with hybrid cars, and it's quite surprising or not surprising, depends on how you look at it, that Toyota is very close to its target and has by far the highest or the largest portfolio in that technology field. The technology field itself is, of course, defined with the IPC classes, with search terms and a combination of those two things. And of course, there is always a little bit of plus minus, that you can never be 100% sure that there aren't any patents in there that actually do not belong to hybrid cars, but the scatter is very small. We tested that. So it is clear Toyota has a huge portfolio of over 10,000 patents or patent applications in that field, and they're very close to where they should be in terms of their target. Okay, next slide. Now, it's also clear that the penalties that companies have to pay by missing their respective CO2 targets vary drastically. So you see on the right again, a second plot by PA Consulting that lists the OEMs and their penalty in millions euros, and this in relation to their EBIT in 2018. And you see a wide range of 0.1% all the way to 400% for Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, for example. Now, if you correlate this to the plot on the left done with the analysis, you also see clearly that Toyota comes away by far the best, and others like Tata, they have, or Mazda in this case, that they have a very large penalty to pay, over 100% of their EBIT in 2018. And as a summary, you could say there's a trend. It's not a complete fit in the trend line, but you can certainly state that companies with high or large patent portfolios in the hybrid technology range pay the least penalty, give or take. So this is, in a nutshell, not too surprising, as we know on the market and as we will see as we go further into the analysis. So this slide that we see here now is a little bit different. It has filing years as an x-axis and portfolio size as a y-axis, and it shows the trend in 3 different technology fields from 1970 all the way to 2018. What's interesting is that, for example, or what's most interesting here is the blue trace from coming from the IC, automotive field, or internal combustion engines, and you clearly see that there is a 4 or 5 plateaus, if you will. So you have 4 or 5 different areas, slices in time, where the line slows down and then takes another jump to the next level. And I would like to elaborate on these 5 time sequences, if you will, quickly. So starting by the one on the left, you see that in the global events that were happening at the time and are relevant to the industry is of course the oil crisis 1 and 2, and you see that each crisis caused a more or less pronounced rise in the activity patent filing in the automotive industry. Further, you also see that around 1970, the Clean Air Act was decided in the US and the Parliament, and we could probably say that this is the first major political statement or event where politicians said, okay, we have to do something about the air that we're polluting. We have to limit that somehow. In the same period, we have some more or less important technology developments in the automotive field. Of course, I picked what I think are some milestones in the technology development. We could debate whether or not these are the most important ones, but I do believe they have importance for the rest of the history on the internal combustion engine. One is the Jensen-Healy, the first 4-valve cylinder head used in a larger production vehicle. That's as early as 1971, 72. We have, of course, the Porsche 911 Turbo. It's not just a very sought-after classic car. It also, together maybe with the BMW 2002, marks the start of major production numbers for turbocharged gasoline engines. Further, we have the first diesel engine vehicle using turbochargers. That's the Daimler Mercedes OM Ölmotor 617 engine. And then, of course, and I think that's really important, the 3-way catalyst was introduced around 1980. So to the next time window, we have a third oil crisis. That is of less significance. By the way, you also see that in the oil price. The oil price rise in the third crisis was by far not as high as in crisis 1 and 2. So, and then we see that as European and also American legislation started with limiting emissions with Euro 1 and Tier 0 and Tier 1 in the US. Now on the technology side, in this time area, you see that Honda was very early with a turbocharger with a variable turbine geometry on a gasoline engine, although it is not as complex, or it wasn't as complex as today's VGT turbochargers are. And I think one other very important point in the time axis is that VW started producing and selling their direct injection diesel system known as TDI. This is certainly, or was certainly, a major breakthrough and opened many other developments in the diesel field in terms of noise emissions and fuel economy. Then we have some new technology with the Honda VTEC system. It's one of the more complex variable valve timing systems that came into mass production. And also very important, in my opinion, 1993-94, Bosch bought the IP portfolio from the ETH of Zurich and or Fiat or both on the common rail technology. I think this is was a good move, and it defined the further development of the diesel combustion system. Then on the third time slot, we have 9/11, unfortunately. We have Euro 2 and 3, so more stringent emissions regulations in Europe. And we have another set of important technologies that came on the market. So Mitsubishi, for example, came on the market with the first certified direct injection system for gasoline engines. Then the VGT, so the variable turbine geometry, was introduced on the diesel engine, and the first diesel engine, Volkswagen, I believe it was, that had 40% of efficiency was then realized. A little bit further down, we have the common rail system that was then produced and in larger quantities by Bosch. It came into the market with the Alpha 156. I think that was a major breakthrough. We have cylinder deactivation by Mercedes and the M113 engine. And then I believe the Valvetronic system from BMW was another fairly complex system trying to address the pumping losses and thereby the CO2 emissions on on gasoline engines. The fourth one we have, and I think that's important, the subprime crisis in the US. We have even more stringent emissions legislations like Euro 4, and we have new technologies or a new combination of technologies, although you could debate whether or not the Volkswagen Twin Charger was that new. Most of us know that the Lancia used it in rally engines. And then we have the 911, again, a Porsche that uses VGT on gasoline engines now, a complex system comparable to the one used on diesel engines in mass production, high output gasoline engines. And of course, we have the selective catalytic reduction by Mercedes. I think these are also breakthrough technologies to further comply with more stringent emissions legislations. Yes, and then the last one, that's I call it the past subprime crisis. We see a drastic drop in the portfolio sizes on the internal combustion engine. We see that there is in my opinion, not a whole lot of new technologies that came into the market, maybe different application, different combinations of existing technologies. And I know that there's a lot of detailed development that is time and money consuming. But what's interesting is towards the end of that fifth time window, there's a lot of announcements. So, and this is more or less after the, I call it the diesel crisis, as we know it from Volkswagen in the US. And this started not only a debate in the public opinion, but I think it also triggered a change in the behavior in the OEMs. For example, Volvo announced that they're going to stop producing diesel engines, so did Toyota a little bit later. And in between somewhere, GM announced that they're going to go all electric. And some of these statements are certainly visible in the green trace, which represents the portfolio, overall portfolio size in the electric vehicle market. So while this is all happening, or was happening, that I just described, underneath that history umbrella, if you will, there's certainly there happened a few things that maybe weren't so popular, and maybe even some people had questions about. For example, the first Prius Series 1 came out in 1979, so that's over 20 years ago. Then the Honda Insight came out shortly after, mostly in the US as far as I know. But Ford had with an Escape, they had a model, BMW with the X6, and then I think the highly anticipated GM Volt or Ampera came on the market, and then we see a slight drop in the hybrid activity. We have cars like the Volkswagen Passat that came on the market not too long ago. Also, what's important, right around 2008, Tesla came out with the first Roadster, their first model, but then we have a sharp increase in activities in the electric vehicle domain, yielding, if you will, with the Nissan Leaf that came on the market 2012 plus minus, and then the second model by Tesla. So in a nutshell, I think you can summarize and say there was not a whole lot of activity on the left side of the plot. I'm tempted to say because it was not really needed. Those first emission targets weren't all that strict. You see a plateau between 1978 and 1994, and then you see a rise, and this repeats itself 3 or 4 times, and then you have the drop after 2008. Interesting, I think, the denser the legislations are with Euro 1 to 4 and Tier 1 to 2, the higher the technology announcements, achievements, and introduction into the market. In my view, this saw a relatively sharp drop after 2008, and the mentality or the focus within the OEMs seemed to have changed to other technology, and based on these plots, it seemed to have shifted to electric vehicles. Thank you.
So now I take over now. Here's Jochen Spurg from Econside, and I'm going directly into patent side now to show you how we actually what we have seen in the patent side BI when analyzing these 3 engine targets. What you see now currently on the patent side BI is quite simply on the left. This is what is the search field. There you define what you want to search, companies, IPC classes or keywords. We have already prepared already before about 3 of those technology fields: electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and ICEs. This is what actually Econside is doing. We have about 300 or so of these technology fields ready to take into an analysis. And if you just put that into the search field, then you go finally into the analysis part of the tool. And there you see again the repetition of what we had before. Now we have this nice curve of ICEs, what Lucas has finally explained, when happened what. And we have here rather simple curve of filing year versus portfolio size of patent families. Rather simple, and usually filing years and filing behaviors, as it is quite nice, it doesn't give you really much of what's going on or what is important today, especially in patents. And therefore, we go now through the only 7 slides until we reach the last one, which shows you all which is capable, which is doable on exactly this collection of patents. So the first one is, for example, we take just what we had before now, and we only look at the same data again. What is filed? What was filed by 15 companies. We have chosen 15 companies here, and I show you later why that is. Why we have chosen these. You see quite well that, for example, Toyota has filed in their whole history of patents we have in the database. We have about 50,000 patent families, which is quite a few. Not all of them are still valid. Many of those are old. So we have currently here the inactive and active patents, so everything which is available. So we have also for, let's say, for Volkswagen, we have 33,000, etc. Now, Volkswagen or VW Group, this is just the ultimate owner, and it's not just the ultimate owner, it's actually everything which patent site has put belong such an ultimate owner. And this could be rather a lot. The corporate tree of a Volkswagen carries everything or takes everything into consideration which Volkswagen has taken over in that time or has a share of more than 51. So it's Scania, it's Porsche, it's whatever you can think of. It's, they have put together, and with just one click, rather easily, you can directly access or click or analyze this whole company. This is the same for all the others, and you can imagine how difficult that is or was without such a database in the backhand. You see also quite well already that most of our companies have done more than in IC than all the other technologies, which makes fully sense. And you see also already what a Tesla, for example, has done in patents. So it's about 118 patents currently we have found for Tesla, or which are collected for Tesla, where we have about, as I said, 50,000 for Toyota. Now, when we're going through these patents, most of us don't really are interested in the inactive patents. So if you want to check this small button, you get directly the active patents. This is rather simple and quickly done, and you see directly what the outcome is. This is now what all those companies have as an active patent portfolio, currently active in that specific motor area or the technology area. You see also now Volkswagen has jumped on place 1 with about 16,000 or so patent families in the ICE field. A couple of them also, not so many actually in hybrids, and about 2,000 electric. And you see already now Toyota has jumped to the not only to number 1, but also in active patents, they still are at the top number 1 with 7,000 patent families in the hybrid space. And what you also see now, quite interesting already now, a bike Blue Park, Chinese player or NIO, they're coming up in active patents, and their bubble is getting bigger. Tesla is still the very, very small one underneath. The problem there is, well, it's portfolio side. It's all of those 3.2 million patents in 2018, etc. So it's just masses. Now we're adding the patent-sized quality indicator. So we change now portfolio size into patent asset index. So we don't look at the patents, but we look at the patent strength of those patents in this portfolio. And now the picture is not completely changing. So you see already that, for example, now Toyota has the very highest and the most important portfolio in hybrids. VW Group has still the most relevant or the biggest patent strength, the biggest patent asset index in the ICE environment. And also we see already that Toyota is not that bad actually also in electric vehicles. And what is also already now interesting is most of those big players have all about the same patent strength in this area. Especially in electric, in hybrid, nearly as well, and also actually in ICE, it's not so different. Now already some are interesting here now. So if we look at, for example, Mazda, it's clearly a company doing ICE technology, and it is doing that rather well. It has a quite big bubble, let's say, and patent asset index on the ICE, but not really that much on the others. And the other way, the other picture, already NIO and Blue Park, and also now Tesla's coming out, that red button is coming. They have quite an interesting portfolio already also in patent asset index. So they're not only players just pushing out patents as paperwork, but they have already filed patents and going broad. They're not only filing patents in China, they're going via PCT, US, EP, etc. So for example, let's check for by Blue Park. You see already they have now 12% or so of PCT, but all we have to check on NIO, for example. They have already 18% of their patents in the US and 3% of the patents already in Europe. So they're definitely coming, and they're not really to be neglected. The problem here is, well, we don't have any history. We don't see any developments. So what when you want to do that, we check for the individual technologies now. We're going into the electric vehicles, first of all, to see what is actually happening in the electric vehicle space. What we see now here is the same 15 companies again. And we see on the right the amount or the patent strengths of the patents they have filed in the respective year, and we only check for the time being just the active patents. So we see, for example, on Toyota, they have increased their patent portfolio, keeping them still alive. In the electric vehicle, they had a bit of the highest or the biggest point, the Zenith, at 2011. And then later on, they dropped a bit in numbers, but they're still rather well active in the field. Interesting also, Honda has more or less the same curve historically. They also had been most active in 2011, and then they had a bit of a break, and they're now doing again a bit. But the highest point was actually 2011. The same also was true for Nissan, and the same was also true at a certain extent also Mitsubishi. So the Japanese, they have all had done a lot already until 2011, and then a bit of a, let's say, hesitant or not set any longer strong filing activity later on. What is interesting at 2011, actually, it's when Ford and Huawei and also BMW and also Kia and also Hyundai, they all came up with more patents. So they increased their portfolios in that time. And what is also interesting is when you look at the next point of time in time, 2015, that's when the diesel crisis came, the Chinese are coming, and they're not just coming, they're exploding. So this is what we see in the electric vehicle. And we see also, for example, Mazda has done a bit, but stopped it more or less. So they really don't do that much. Also quite interesting is Tesla. They have only a few patents. You see quite well, it's in 2007, it's only 10 patents with a rather high patent asset index. So they have a really high average quality in their patents. And 2014 was the last big plot by Tesla. And then they said, we are giving all the patents free to bolster the electric vehicle. And later on, actually, their activity was not any longer that dramatic. And this is interesting to see, to compare actually to the ICE development. If you go to ICE, then the Volkswagen Group has increased their patent portfolio in the ICE space rather well in the last years as well. Every year about 1,000 or so active patents. The same for Ford. They're really pushing out patents really strongly. Actually, also BMW is increasing the ICE portfolio rather drastically. And you see the same also for Hyundai. The only one who is not really in the same league is actually Nissan. Nissan had their highest activity in ICE in about 2003, and they now not any longer follow this trade at the same time. And as you know, the Nissan Leaf is currently one of the most there's the highest sales in electric vehicles. There seems to be, at least for Nissan, that they have decided rather early to go in a different approach in this field. The others are really going up in numbers. Some of those Japanese, for example, Honda and also Toyota, are not really doing it the same extent anymore. They had also the same highest peak or the zenith at 2011. But this is probably also due to the Japanese industry at all. So this is quite interesting to see, to compare actually to electric vehicles. And now when we go to hybrids, the picture changes again. So here in hybrid, we have definitely Toyota home story, first of all. So Toyota went into these hybrid technology very early, and they've pushed out really some patents in this space and until now. And it's the own company having actually a complete fleet of hybrids nowadays. You can see also that GM, for example, has done quite a bit of, at least or about 500 or so patents per year, still keeping them, but their activity dropped drastically later on. So they probably don't really believe into the hybrid anymore, at least from the figures what we can see. Ford, for example, on the other hand, has changed that their strategy in the recent years. They have put more out in the hybrid space, but they're very active in the patent field in nearly all areas currently. What we see also is that actually VW Group and BMW and Kia, the same as we had before again in the EV, they also started in 2012, 10 and 11 with activity in this hybrid space. But what we see also, there's not that amount of new activity. It's still active, but not exploding, no really drastic changes. So the established technology of hybrids seems to be established, seems to be used, it seems to be not uninteresting, but not really exploding. Maybe Lucas, you want to say some words about what I've shown in the last 3 slides? I want to add something.
I think you've seen you've said most of the things that can be said when you see that data. It is clear if you take that information that we can possibly get out of IP data, you see certain trends, as Jochen said. It seems to be in line with GM. They're making a no big secret that their future will be electric. It is also clear that Hyundai came out with some good electric and or hybrid driven propulsion systems in cars. It is also clear that Mazda said that they're going to cling on to the internal combustion engine for quite a while. They came out with a homogeneous compression engine in series production, and therefore their footprint, if you will, in the hybrid technology is still very small. So it seems to be in line with what we see on the market. And as Jochen also said, it seems that Toyota developed a lot of their technology that enabled them to equip an entire fleet with hybrid technology already 13 years ago, roughly, or let's call it 10. That's it. Thank you.
Well, to conclude finally now, this is what the curve of all these 3 technologies is looking like if we take into consideration active patents only, the patent asset index, and everything we had in between. So if sometimes it's really loading because we have about 240,000 patents actually analyzing in the back engine. So it's sometimes really taking, everything is live, so it takes some time, just a bit time. But what you see quite well is actually the ICE is neither dead. It's still alive. It was the absolutely most important technology in 2000. It is still there and is still raising actually in total, so it is not exploding as we would definitely not expect, but it is still there and still important. And we see also, and it's really a bit long loading currently, so I'm checking that over to the to this one. So what we have is large importance of the ICE engines in the 2000 until 2020, but we see also that hybrids have started in 2000 very slowly, 2005 and 7, increasing even more, and they came up to be rather important in 2008. This is where the pressure on the CO2 targets were really set high, and there we see a quite well increase of hybrid technology, several years, until about 2013. Then the hybrid technology seemed to be more or less established. Cars have been around. Toyota has reached their goals, and there was a new technology rising up, especially after the start of Tesla and others. You see quite well that there was very high interest in EVs at that time, but that slowed a bit after a while, and now after 2015, after the diesel crisis, as petrol, for example, petrol engines have raised the CO2 again, the question raised somewhere at some point, are EV the only and last hope to match the CO2 targets? Actually, a question we cannot even answer today. But what you see quite well is that there was such an activity in this area and so much dynamic in this area, and especially in this field, there's such a big risk also, and a higher disruptive potential. That is definitely interesting to look at this area. And if you see, for example, in all of those three spaces where there have been already the highest disruptive capacity was actually in EVs. There was a Tesla coming into the market where nobody believed in a new player come in. There's the Chinese players coming into it in this market, and this didn't happen at all in the other areas, in the IC and the hybrid space. So we believe that this area is definitely important to watch. It's not the solution, or it's definitely not the only solution for all the problems we might have, but it's definitely an area of really high dynamic and really high disruptive potential. The solution of CO2 in the end is potentially neither nor. So it will not be one of those technologies, but very many. So if we want to go from the classic transport to the green transport, or to climate zero carbon dioxide transport, we have to find many solutions, and we have to incorporate many solutions to it. It's not only, we do not only want to have or need to have very efficient motors. We want to have weight reduction, so lighter cars, also for planes. We need autonomous driving and all kinds of carpooling and platooning and whatsoever is available to reduce CO2 in driving cars. But we also need new fuels. So we will have synthetic fuels which are not based on fossils, but we produce these. And nowadays we can even reduce this with CO2 out of the air, but still not in that amount we need. We will have, or we need to have, more renewable energy to fuel all the electric cars which are around. We cannot just fuel them with coal, and we need biofuels for the other cars to go down in CO2 with renewable sources on the carbon part. We also definitely will see some fuel cell technology, as we see already today. And we will have green hydrogen for that. We cannot use just hydrogen from any resource. So all of those solutions, they might then lead us to a new or potentially zero CO2 or minus CO2 actually transport in the future. And none of those will succeed by itself. We will only have a chance if we put all of those together. And if it is then a car driving a IC or a hybrid or an electric, as important that it is only one part of the picture, and we will see which of those technologies really take off in the end. So that's our conclusion. We cannot see the future. We just can see where we have to look at in the future. And if we want to know more about all kinds of technologies, we can always dig down in all of those. We have, as I said, about 300 or so ready to look at. And there are so many players working in this space that every of those technologies is important or interesting to look at from a certain perspective. And that's actually when where I'm closing. This is made possible by PatentSite, and I'm very happy and glad that they've given us the opportunity to show you a bit on the automotive space we are currently exploring in this, especially in this climate and regulation space. And I hope you enjoyed it, at least a certain part. And if you have any questions, there are people to contact if you want. Lucas has heard very well for all the automotive information and questions. Andreas from PatentSite for anything about PatentSite and how to use what we have shown in the tool. You can use the tool on the search side, and with a lot more than what we have just now done. And if it's anything about technology fields, then it would be to me. Otherwise, I give over to Andreas.
Yes, thank you both for this really interesting presentation. We do have some questions, and we do have still a little bit of time. I'm pretty sure we can address them in this amount of time. I read the question, can I see this for my company? Can I see this for a different group of companies also? would be a question for me. Yes, of course. So we can of course put other companies in this analysis. For example, suppliers. I read this question a few times. Definitely possible. Then another question. The technology for Jochen, the technology fields. A good analysis is only as good as the technology field it's based on. Could you just give us a few sentences or words on how these technology fields have been set up? And also the question, could we, these technology fields are quite high level, could we further break this down? And you said like it's not really sure what's going to happen, but do you see any trends in these subfields yet?
Well, very good question. Thanks. Yes, first of all, the technology fields are set up by what is available to patent experts nowadays. So we really use any kind of class systems like IPC, CPC, F terms, whatever is available, which makes sense. We break that down in specific areas or specific classes, which we can use directly. We need then keywords for higher up classes. And we match or check that always again in different approaches. We use either the typical random picking approach, where we check what we got and what the amount of errors is. And then also what we use now currently is the patent sites technology clustering. This is a quite interesting, nice tool actually, where the whole database is clustered into many segments, and you can directly check in your technology field what the outcome is, if you have some strange issues, some noises, or if there's anything which not relates to the area. And we also check that back with expert like Lucas. We have pinpoint, I think, ICE, I don't know how many times until we were quite happy with it, checking what might be, what should be belong to it, or what is actually the amount of noise until you have a certain amount of recall and precision. You never actually be perfect, and it is never actually there's not only one perspective. So if you need to tailor your own technology field in a certain area, you're maybe even a better expert to do that. We try to have at least the best outcome in recall and precision. What we can also do is, and what we actually do is, we drill that down. We drill that further down into sub-technologies. As I said, for example, the climate space, we have now currently about 60 or 70 different technology fields only in the climate space. For automotive, we have not that many yet. There might be more. We have, for example, efficient ICEs on the heat insulation already. We're going into friction, etc. on these other terms as well. Most of those actually can be done on demand. So if you have certain areas of choice you need, then just address us. We can set that up for you in any kind of dimension. We can also add any other sort of AI or whatever, what makes sense. For the time being, we mostly use expert searches, as we still believe this is the rather best and quickest asset or way to produce these technology fields quite properly to what you need. Then trends on sub-technologies. This is rather tricky. I think in the automotive space, I have to give that to Lucas to show me trends. I just can't tell from the other part. You see trends in very many of those climate-related areas like biofuels, synfuels. You see a huge trend in autonomous driving. This is absolutely exploding in all kinds of dimensions. And you see definitely also a little bit of something happening in fuel cell, but not really from the technology side. In fuel cells, for example, the technology is quite well set. It is not really the technology which is driving fuel cells. We have that already since years. So it's not the same race, for example, in patents as you have in other areas in the climate environment.
All right.
Lucas, something on the automotive trend, maybe?
I do also have another question for Lucas as well. I think this is you answered it really well. Maybe for Jochen, in one sentence, does the fields also include mopeds and motorcycles?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we have not actually excluded it. It is also containing a certain amount of trucks as well. So we have not excluded that specifically. This is something we could do, but we have not.
That's all right. it's I don't see any reason why to exclude this. And then a question I would ask for Lucas, as he is the technology expert. I guess a question which might come up a lot recently, and a lot of people asking themselves: do you think the current situation with the shutdown and the coronavirus and the resulting drop in carbon dioxide emission, and also a drop in the oil price, will have any effect on this path, on the development?
That's the hardest question you could possibly give me. I have to be honest, I would be lying if I say yes or no. I do have a gut feeling, and this looks like this, and it's partially based on the trends that we saw with Jochen, and when he summarized with the last slide. In my opinion, it seems to be quite clear that the internal combustion engine is on standby. People are still doing quite a bit of work, detail optimization, maybe, for example, relating to thermal insulation, turbocharging, valve train systems for Miller cycles, and others. In a parenthesis, I have to say these technologies might be driven by use in hybrid vehicles. It's very hard to separate all that in the database on the patent side. But I think IC engines are on standby. Similar with hybrids, they have now a slight slope. They're still increasing a little bit, and the big disruptor is, of course, the electric vehicle technology. Also, if we combine that with what has been announced by the big OEMs like GM and Volkswagen and others, how many billions they're going to put into production lines, technologies, and so forth, to throw out these large numbers of new electrically driven cars on the market. I doubt that once this is started, that they can just stop and say, oh no, now we go another way. I think the IC, the internal combustion engine technology is kept alive. So when other technologies become viable, like synthetic fuels, like hydrogen. Note, hydrogen can also be burned in an internal combustion engine, that they can swing around. For now, I think the trend is clear. The OEMs are, I say, flooding into the electric vehicle domain because, as we saw in the beginning, the CO2 targets are so low for the future that it is not possible to do that any longer with just an internal combustion engine. Having that said, it also driven by the fact that the legislators in the countries count an EV as a zero CO2 emitting entity or vehicle. Now we could start another debate whether or not that's actually true, but as long as the boundaries stay as they are today, I think for the short term at least, or midterm, electric vehicles will have to play a major role if we like it or not. And I think it's fairly independent of what we see right now with that crisis. But that's in a large part my personal opinion based on information available.
Perfect, great. Lucas, Jochen, once again, thanks a lot. Yeah, with these words, we will close the meeting. Would be great if you could take the time to fill out the survey, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So everyone, stay safe, enjoy the rest of the day, and looking forward to talk to you again in another webinar.